Billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. We want to welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Our discussion for today, and before I mention the discussion for today, let me extend a hearty Ramadan Mubarak to my brothers and sisters around the world and also to our guests. With that said, the topic for today is a very political one. It's a thought-provoking topic, and it's one that will no doubt generate a lot of reaction. Should Muslims in the U.S. boycott this year's Iftar at the White House? This is our focus for today. My guests for today's conversation are three. Two return guests, Brother Malik Aziz and Brother Muhammad Bashir. And we have a first-time guest by the name of Abdurrahman El-Gule, also known to family and friends as Brother Abid. So without any further ado, let's welcome these brothers to the platform. Assalamu alaikum, my brothers.
Alaikum assalam.
To all three of you. Alhamdulillah. May Allah bless this month to be one of spiritual, intellectual, and activist elevation.
Ameen.
Ameen. My brothers, we have a challenging topic to deal with today. It's one that many of our brothers and sisters would be a bit uncomfortable with, because it is so political. It's some would view it as being confrontational, and it's an issue that that nevertheless we must wrestle with because of the time that we're in and everything that's going on. I mean, subhanAllah, there is a genocide taking place in occupied Palestine, and there are other repressive regimes around the world that are paying very close attention to how the global community and how official governments around the world, especially governments in the West, and at the top of that totem pole is the United States of America, how they respond to this catastrophe that has been unfolding for the past few months. So this is really a challenging issue that we're dealing with today, but it's one that we must deal with because it's an obligation on us, both in terms of truth, in terms of justice. It forces us to deal with the reality of the responsibility we have on our shoulders to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. The responsibility we have to be exemplars for the rest of humanity. So with that being said, we want to give a special welcome to our brother, our first-time guest, Brother El-Gule, who is coming to us, I believe, from Chicago. I'd like, before we get into the substance of today's conversation, I'd like for you, Brother Abdurrahman El-Gule, to say something about yourself. Introduce yourself to the viewing and listening audience. who you are, what you do, and then inshallah ta'ala, we will begin our conversation with a very thought-provoking piece of video. Brother, go ahead.
Thank you, Hajj Mauri. First of all, Ramadan Mubarak to everyone, and may the blessings of this holy month fall upon you and your families.
Ameen.
I am a lifelong Chicagoan of Palestinian background. My father was born in Jerusalem and left in 1948 with the Nakba. And my mother is from a city in Palestine called Nablus. They came to the United States in the 50s, late 50s. So we are one of the more original Palestinian families in Chicago. But I've been a lifelong Chicagoan. I'm an engineer by trade, but I'm very much in tune with the community. I volunteer a lot for different organizations. Throughout the years, I worked with a wide base of organizations, Muslim and Arab, both. I was the Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee local chapter president for a few years. Among other roles I've had with the community, more of an advisor, but sometimes as a leader.
Alhamdulillah. Now, with that said, first of all, again, welcome to the platform, my brother. It's a pleasure to have you, and I'm glad that our brother Malik, he brought you to our attention. Before we get started with our conversation, there is a piece of video that I'd like for all three of us to take a look at. President Joe Biden delivered his hopefully last State of the Union address just on this past Thursday, and he has some very interesting things to say. Interestingly, he left the Nakba that's taking place in occupied Palestine last on his list. And this was the only part of his address that he got a little tongue-tied on, and understandably so. I mean, you know, there were a lot of folk within his administration and supporters of his in the broader community that were kind of sitting on pins and needles, wondering, you know, if he was going to have any major gaffes during the course of his address. He did not. He gave a pretty good address, even though there were a number of contradictions that only those who closely follow, you know, politics and what have you would have picked up on. But for the most part, it was a well-delivered presentation, again, except when he came to the issue of Gaza, which he left to the end, and that's when it was clear that he was uncomfortable, and rightfully so. SubhanAllah, his behavior, he and his administration's behavior vis-a-vis this genocide in occupied Palestine has been terrible. It's just been terrible. So, but with that said, we want to see a clip from the address, and then, inshallah ta'ala, we can begin our conversation. Let's see that clip, Brother Saalakhan.
This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. In his address, President Biden talked about Gaza, which has become a key election issue. As they watched, progressive lawmakers Cori Bush, Summer Lee, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib, the only Palestinian American in Congress, held up signs reading, "Lasting ceasefire now," and "Stop sending bombs." Tlaib, Summer, and Bush also donned Palestinian keffiyehs. Separately, many Democratic women wore white in honor of the suffragettes. Today's International Women's Day. This is President Biden.
Israel has the right to go after Hamas. Hamas ended this conflict by releasing hostages. Laying down arms could end it. by releasing the hostages, laying down arms, and surrendering those responsible for October 7th. But Israel has Israel has a added burden because Hamas hides and operates among the civilian population like cowards, under hospitals, daycare centers, and all the like. Israel also has a fundamental responsibility, though, to protect innocent civilians in Gaza. This war has taken a greater toll on innocent civilians than all previous wars in Gaza combined. More than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of whom are not Hamas. Thousands and thousands of innocents, women and children, girls and boys, also orphaned. Nearly 2 million more Palestinians under bombardment or displacement. Homes destroyed, neighborhoods in rubble, cities in ruin, families without food, water, medicine. It's heartbreaking. I've been working nonstop to establish an immediate ceasefire that would last for 6 weeks to get all the prisoners released, all the hostages released, to get the hostages home and ease the intolerable and humanitarian crisis and build toward an enduring, something more enduring. The United States has been leading international efforts to get more humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day.
Ahead of Biden's State of the Union address, hundreds of protesters blockaded roads outside the White House near the Capitol, delaying Biden's speech as they demanded an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Other protests took place nationwide. More are expected this weekend in Chicago, where the Democratic National Convention will take place this summer. An anti-war coalition held a 24-hour vigil in the city's Federal Plaza, reading as many names as possible of the more than 30,000 Palestinians killed by Israel's bombing of Gaza. They also hosted an alternate State of the Union address by.
Okay, let's start there. What are your thoughts on what President Biden had to say about his government's emergency response to the crisis? The multi-pronged crisis in Gaza. Who wants to start out with?
I could start. Like you said, Hajj, he didn't get into that subject till maybe an hour into his speech, one of the longest State of the Unions I've ever seen. And just like he waited so long to get to the subject, the administration has waited so long to even address humanitarian aid. Recently, they've started dropping boxes from planes, some which hit people when the parachutes don't open. And now he's talking about a pier that will take 2 months to build and to deliver food. So people are not only dying from the bombing, but they're dying from starvation and hunger. And to me, it's too much, too late, too little, too late, I should say. And the hypocrisy of providing bombs to kill people, but then also providing food to feed them is just hypocritical. And like his speech was all over the place, condemning and then supporting and then saying negative things about what's happening to the civilians. That's it's like he's all over the place. He wants his cake and eat it too. And it's just for us, we know the hypocrisy of it, but he's trying to hoodwink the public.
Brother Malik, your thoughts, Aki?
Yeah, I just like to tip my hat to that President Joe Biden, who is a self-proclaimed political Zionist, and he's a hypocrite. And he made a case, and if you look beneath his words, that this is all Hamas's problem. They're playing checkers. Our movement against this has to play chess. And what do I mean by that? Is that it cannot allow the United States government or the propaganda that's coming out of Zionist Israel to set the specifications for our struggle. And they're attempting to do this by saying this is all about October the 7th. No, it's really pre-Nakba is where the problem started. It's about pre-1948. And we have to understand that we cannot get into a conversation on their checkerboard about aid, about ceasefire, when the game is played on the chessboard and it is the end of occupation.
Right. Brother Muhammad, what are your thoughts, Aki, on this?
Oh, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My thought is, I didn't anticipate anything different from him. Does that make sense? I anticipate him to be consistent with who he has been since my very first introduction to him. He has himself, as the brother indicates, a self-proclaimed Zionist. So why wouldn't he speak on behalf of the Zionists? He's president of the United States, which means that he's a politician. So therefore, he has to speak out both sides of his mouth, because that's what politicians in America do. The issue here is a morally constructed issue, and nobody wants to address it as a morally imperative issue, meaning what is right and what is wrong. So when you hear him flip back to it's all Hamas's fault, as one of the brothers indicated, then what you're really talking about, he's trying to obfuscate the moral issue of whether or not you can go in and kill civilians if you believe that you have the right to chase down what you consider to be a terrorist group. So to throw the whole idea out there of terrorism and all that kind of stuff that's obfuscating, hiding the true issue and the true intent of what the people in Gaza are going through, and what the intent of the Western world, including the United States and Israel, is for Gaza. It is to destroy it, as it has been since what's the guy, Herschel, decided that they needed a Zionist state. They needed to eliminate the people there. And this is their latest attempt at attempting to eliminate it, which is a moral issue that has not been addressed and will not be addressed, because American politician and American will does not have a moral center. That's not me talking. That's Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael talking back in '68.
Yeah, and Hajj, one point to Mohammed Ibn Bashir's point is, this deflection. He mentioned President Biden that release some hostages. There are 7,000 Palestinian hostages illegally imprisoned in Israel, 700 whom are children in this issue. 7,000. So this whole deflection, and they want to, this is about the hostages and let's make a ceasefire, prison swap, and all this kind of stuff. No. In the occupation, we have to keep our focus on setting the specifications for our struggle. This is very important, and we can talk a little bit about how we're going to do that a little later on in this discussion.
Brother Saalakhan, we got a piece of video on the settlers, how the settlers are factoring into the misery being experienced by our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Let's see that piece of video. And what that is, settlers are being allowed by the Israeli government to block hundreds of vehicles with relief items, with food and with medicine in them, trying to cross into Gaza. They are being allowed to block them from. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, man. All right. Yeah, they're being allowed to block the aid coming in, and so we have this multi-pronged, very oppressive blockade of much needed resource from coming into Gaza. And as it's been pointed out, I mean, there is not just snipers taking the lives of Palestinians, but and bombs being dropped still in and around an enclave that was supposed to have been a safe zone within Gaza. But settlers are being allowed to factor into the equation as well. What are your thoughts on that piece of video and what it represents?
Well, it's obviously, the government of Israel is okay with that. I mean, it's part of their policy is not to provide aid. They're letting the settlers be the fall guys for it not getting there. They don't like the idea of sending it in the first place. So I guess there's no obstruction of traffic laws in Israel because I don't see any of them being removed or detained or arrested. They're allowed to block the aid. And that just tells me that the government is okay with it. Of course, we all know that,
yes.
In the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Let me interrupt. You know what? One of the things that you do when you try enough cases is you learn to put pieces together for evidentiary purposes, circumstantial evidence, direct evidence, things like that. They come together to create a picture. These so-called settlers, I wish we would stop using the terms that they use. They are burglars. They stole some land, and now they have created what they consider to be settlements, and now they are trying to define themselves in the terms of settlers as if it has some legal legitimacy nationally or internationally. They're giving it national authority because it's the so-called state of Israel. But internationally, still they are occupiers. Still they are violating international human rights laws. But put the pieces together. They bomb Gaza, literally wipe it out, etc. They bomb the hospital. They say they don't bomb hospitals, but they bomb hospitals, schools, etc. Now the people are being ushered into different places. And each time the people are ushered into these different places that are supposed to be safe places, they are bombed there. They are bombed in refugee camps. They are bombed in hospitals other than Shifa. They are bombed wherever they go in the places that go to the north. Go to the north because it's safe there. And then they get bombed in the north. Now begin to put the pieces together. Now they get to an area where someone or some group is deciding to try to send some aid, a minuscule amount of aid to the people there. The original concept of this particular bombing and the bombing of hospitals, etc., they cut off water, they cut off food, they cut off electricity, etc. Put that with the fact that they are now blocking these shipments or these trucks, these limited trucks that are trying to come through. It can only point to one thing. It's not just that the government is allowing it. It is part and parcel of the same plan. The settlers are just, the so-called settlers in Israel are people who are there, but almost everybody who is there in Israel has to participate on some level in the military apparatus, either by a commitment or whatever, etc. So they're like pseudo military anyway. All right. So now, if you put it all together, it's a government orchestrated, government sponsored effort to keep the same pressure on that was from the beginning. And it has nothing to do with Hamas. It has nothing to do with anything except to get rid of the people who are there, since they've been trying to do it since 1947. The exact same thing. They're just escalating it now because they believe that they now have the power. They have Joe Biden in the White House. They have the will of the Western world behind them, and they believe they can get away with it. These settlers are partial if you put the pieces together of the exact same plan. And now let's talk about this thing that Biden is attempting to build. If we think for 1 minute that he is going to build a shelter. Let's call it a shelter that he announced. If we think for 1 minute that building of that shelter, which may take a month, 2 months to build, is not part and parcel of something to benefit the Israeli position, we are fooling ourselves. All right. Concentration camps fed people, right? But they were concentration camps, for heaven's sakes. Reservations fed people, but they reservations. So they benefited the people who built the reservation. They benefited the people who built the concentration camps while they fed the people. And that's all it is. It's nothing. This is nothing new here. They're not allowing, the government's not allowing it. They are part and parcel of what the government's entire plan is. And that's to eliminate Palestine, eliminate the concept of Palestine, and eliminate the Palestinian people from the area.
Yes.
When I first heard about the pier, the barge, whatever terminology they're using for what he is proposing to build, his administration is proposing to build to provide humanitarian relief, the first thought that came to mind for me was that the fastest way to address and the fastest and most effective way to address this crisis would be twofold. One, to stop the bombing, stop giving Israel weapons, number one. And number two, to deploy a hospital ship to the coast of Gaza. A hospital ship could be deployed in just a matter of days. And that would be more than sufficient to be able to begin to address in a very significant way the multi-pronged humanitarian needs of those internally displaced brothers and sisters of ours in occupied Palestine. A hospital ship, we have them. This, to me, this was just more of the same type of time-consuming deflection, and coming at a time when he and his administration are very concerned about, the polls and how, he is falling in the polls. The response that folk are giving in the primaries that are taking place. This is really about politics and about political expediency. And while at the end of the day, doing nothing to address this horrific crisis that our brothers and sisters are facing in occupied Palestine in real time, something that the global community is seeing. And on that note, let me also say, this is Women's History Month. I'm here in the Washington, D.C. area, as you are, Brother Mohammed Bashir. I've been to the U.S. Capitol on 3 occasions over the past, month or two. And one of the things that I've been seeing that has been very encouraging for me has been the number of activists, of concerned community activists, Muslim and non-Muslim, that have been converging on a daily basis on Capitol Hill, walking the halls, cornering or confronting as many of the congressional leaders in the House and Senate, moving about from their offices to hearing rooms, etc., badgering them on their position or questioning them, and at times badgering those who need to be badgered on their position on a ceasefire for apartheid Israel. And so and most of the folk who are walking the halls, not all, but most of them are women. And so in this month, this Women's History Month, I really want to tip my hat and salute the women, the Muslim and non-Muslim women that have been daily going to the Hill and doing this painstaking work of reminding, of challenging these politicians who have the ability to put a stop to the weaponry that's being sent to this apartheid state, weaponry that is aiding and abetting in mass murder and genocide.
Shep, let me interrupt you.
Go ahead.
My heart is aching right about now. Do you really think that they have the ability to stop this? Honestly, everybody says if Biden just makes a phone call to Israel, it'll stop. Do you really think that he has the ability to stop these people from doing what they're doing?
No, but he has the ability. The United States has the ability to slow the roll of what is taking place. I mean, in a very significant way, because we are providing the weaponry, most of the weaponry that's being used.
Great, but you keep saying we. You keep saying we. You got a Republican Senate and you got a small majority Democratic House, and you got a Zionist president. Do you really think they have now? The better question is, do you think they have the will to stop this? Have they ever stood firmly on humanitarian grounds in American politics? Have they ever? Pick a day on humanitarian grounds. And so therefore, that's why when in the 60s and the 70s, people of color, even far back as 51, when William Patterson and Paul Robeson charged genocide to the UN, to the United Nations, which was the first genocide petition done in the history of the UN. When they called for it, they took it outside of the United States to other countries, etc., to be able to explain the plight of what was going on here in America, because they knew there was no will in America, that is, as it relates to politicians and politics, for this kind of thing. I understand the call for a ceasefire. I really do. With all my heart, I wish somebody would step in and call for a ceasefire. But I'm political enough to know that these people do not have a moral compass whereby that is the overriding concern. The morality of right and wrong on what's going on is not the overriding concern. I understand the politics of it, that he may lose the Arab vote, he may lose the Muslim vote. But right now, I know that they are in Capitol Hill, in the White House, calculating the difference between how can we, what group can we play against that? Maybe we can get more white women if we argue abortion, and therefore we can offset the Muslim vote. Maybe we can get more black women and then offset the black male vote. They're doing that. That's politics in America. And I think sometimes we get caught up in the morality of it because we are a moral people. Yes. We want the right and the wrong, and we give our community the misguided idea that they really do have the will, or we can force their will to do something that they have no will and, frankly, no desire to do. That is stand on what is right because it's the right thing to do. And maybe I'm just being entirely too cynical, but I'm too old to sit around and listen to that, to watch the same thing repeat itself over and over and over. And you know what they should call for? You see what the Houthis did in Yemen? They blocked ships coming into Israel. Those countries that have that kind of will, where's that blockade? Why Egypt can, if it had the will, could block the other side of that particular port. They could block the Suez Canal. Didn't we have that kind of a situation in Iran, etc., maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, where somebody blocked the canal? Now you're talking about impacting in a way that is universal and that other countries can participate in, and that could potentially hit these people who don't believe in a sense of morality in the place that they do believe, and that's their unconscious pocket, their dollars and their cents. But I don't believe that they are going to get a ceasefire, even though a ceasefire is absolutely necessary to be called for. But also, I don't believe that without a change in the paradigm on how you treat this politically, how you treat this socially, you are not going to get the change that you want. You're not gonna raise another Martin Luther King Jr. and say march on Edmund Pettus Bridge, and that's going to work now. They don't have that kind of consciousness here, and they don't have it in Israel. So there's going to have to be a different change. I thought the Houthis stepping forward was a monumental step in changing the paradigm as to how the concept of genocide is seen in the world. They said we are part of this genocide treaty. It says that we have an obligation to stop it any way we can. So they chose to blockade ships going into Israel. Brilliant, as far as I was concerned, and moral. Excuse me for the rant, brothers. I apologize. But again,
No,
Listen,
This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
Are you looking for a cross-border road transport company that is committed in achieving high safety standards, who is fast and efficient, and also excel in customer service? Gardi Global specializes in cross-border transport from South Africa to Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi. Gardi Global, situated at 10 Daniel Road, Benrose, Johannesburg. For inquiries, contact our trained staff on 011-614-3108 or email info@gardiglobal.co.za. Safe long haul into Africa is our business. Gardi Global Transport.
This Ramadan, spread the love with Sunshine D margarine, the perfect addition to your seri table for spreading, baking, and cooking. Sunshine D is rich in essential vitamin A, E, and D, and is the tastiest way to get their day or night started. Sunshine D tastes nice, no lies.
Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
Salam Media, your spiritual companion this Ramadan.
Everybody says if Biden just makes a phone call to Israel, it'll stop. Do you really think that he has the ability to stop these people from doing what they're doing?
No, but he has the ability. The United States has the ability to slow the roll of what is taking place. I mean, in a very significant way, because we are providing the weaponry, most of the weaponry that's being used.
Great, but you keep saying we. You keep saying we. You got a Republican Senate, and you got a minority, small majority Democratic House, and you got a Zionist president. Do you really think they have now? The better question is, do you think they have the will to stop this? Have they ever stood firmly on humanitarian grounds in American politics? Have they ever pick a day on humanitarian grounds? And so therefore, that's why when in the 60s and the 70s, people of color, even far back as 51, when William Patterson and Paul Robeson charged genocide to the UN, to the United Nations, which was the first genocide petition done in the history of the UN. When they called for it, they took it outside of the United States to other countries, etc., to be able to explain the plight of what was going on here in America, because they knew there was no will in America, that is, as it relates to politicians and politics, for this kind of thing. I understand the call for a ceasefire. I really do. In all my heart, I wish somebody would step in and call for a ceasefire. But I'm political enough to know that these people do not have a moral compass whereby that is the overriding concern. The morality of right and wrong on what's going on is not the overriding concern. I understand the politics of it, that he may lose the Arab vote, he may lose the Muslim vote. But right now, I know that they are in Capitol Hill, in the White House, calculating the difference between how can we, what group can we play against that? Maybe we can get more white women if we argue abortion, and therefore we can offset the Muslim vote. Maybe we can get more black women and then offset the black male vote. They're doing that. That's politics in America. And I think sometimes we get caught up in the morality of it because we are a moral people. Yes. We want the right and the wrong, and we give our community the misguided idea that they really do have the will, or we can force their will to do something that they have no will and, frankly, no desire to do. That is stand on what is right because it's the right thing to do. And maybe I'm just being entirely too cynical, but I'm too old to sit around and listen to that, to watch the same thing repeat itself over and over and over. And you know what they should call for? You see what the Houthis did in Yemen? They blocked ships coming into Israel. Those countries that have that kind of will, where's that blockade? Why Egypt can, if it had the will, could block the other side of that particular port. They could block the Suez Canal. Didn't we have that kind of a situation in Iran, etc., maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, where somebody blocked the canal? Now you're talking about impacting in a way that is universal and that other countries can participate in, and that could potentially hit these people who don't believe in a sense of morality in the place that they do believe, and that's their unconscious pocket, their dollars and their cents. But I don't believe that they are going to get a ceasefire, even though a ceasefire is absolutely necessary to be called for. But also, I don't believe that without a change in the paradigm on how you treat this politically, how you treat this socially, you are not going to get the change that you want. You're not going to raise another Martin Luther King Jr. and say march on Edmund Pettus Bridge, and that's going to work now. They don't have that kind of consciousness here, and they don't have it in Israel. So there's going to have to be a different change. I thought the Houthis stepping forward was the paradigm as to how the concept of genocide is seen in the world. They said we are part of this genocide treaty. It says that we have an obligation to stop it any way we can. So they chose to blockade ships going into Israel. Brilliant, as far as I was concerned, and moral. Mm-hmm. Excuse me for the rant, brothers. I apologize.
No.
Listen. I just want to say something, Hajj, in the spirit of Muhammad Ibn al-Bashir being right on point on that and how we should segue this conversation. I'm turning my head backwards. Because he nailed it. Yeah, he was on top of it. And one of the points that he's making about this paradigm shift has to do with how the activist community internationally reacts to what their move on the checkerboard is. And that is that this whole route of seeking out NGOs and democratic power politics in order to solve this issue, no good. Hasn't worked in the past, and it's not going to work out now. But what it has given us an opportunity is to reorganize our struggle based upon what worked for us in the past. What worked for us in the past? The Bandung Conference. What worked for us in the past? The non-aligned movement. We have to revisit those issues. Otherwise, they will continue to move around the checkerboard and have us react to it. And I'll say this, and then I'll let Brother Abdul Rahman speak. And that is a pointed message that came out of a radio interview on Black Power Media called Contextualizing Angela Davis by Dr. Joy James. And this analysis was made by Darob Ben Wahad, a former political prisoner with the BLA and Jalil Muttaqin and Sundiata Kohli and Asada Shakur. And what he said was, and I'll read this and then we can move on to this paradigm shift. Because if we don't, then they're going to make the moves and they're going to have us reacting to exactly what I'm going to read. And what he said, as he talked about Angela Davis and going back to the Black liberation struggle in the 60s, he said that the creation of a Black radical icon figure from the 60s through revisionist stealth history of an actual Black revolutionary resistance to the institutional violence of white supremacy was always aimed at a negative encapsulation and a marginalization of the real revolutionary armed struggle as an essential feature of a people's right to self-determination and freedom. And he said, spoiler alert, just as Angela Davis became an iconic figure of Black radical resistance to emerge from the quote-unquote Black left, criminally imprisoned for her relationship to Black revolutionary violence against the state. And what he's saying is this was a figure of our imagination. He goes on to say, and lastly, that we will see the same process take place in living color as the genocidal onslaught of the Zionist apartheid states winds down in Palestine and in U.S. searches for an iconic Palestinian figure to replace Hamas at the negotiating table in a permanent quote-unquote ceasefire to lead the electoral arrangements between Israel and the Palestinian people for a neo-colonial Palestinian settler state that will follow. And as we look at right now, Mahmoud Abbas, 88 years old, approaching 90 years old, he's the president of the Palestinian Authority. He's played out. They're looking for an individual that they will release upon this whole prisoner swap, who will emerge, just as Angela Davis did, as the face of the Black radical movement, and to name that person the new leader of the Palestinian resistance and the new Palestinian state, who will be there as a neo-colonial power. We have to make the moves. We have to think in terms of international struggle, international coalitions all around the globe, so that we can form the Afro-Arab bloc. Africa is emerging. The Arab bloc is emerging right now. This issue, as it relates to the Palestinian genocide, is the catalyst for national and international liberation.
Brother Abid, your thought on this part of the argument.
Well, I agree with Brother Muhammad. They do have the power, but they don't have the will. And you're not cynical, Brother Muhammad, because they've never had the will. 50, 60, 70 years, they have never stopped or attempted to stop this. They could stop funding. They could stop military sales. They have never. After all the atrocities throughout the years, military sales have increased. Funding has increased.
Facts, absolutely.
So they have never shown the will. They don't have the moral compass. They might agree with you in close quarters, but they don't have the moral compass to do what's right. The Houthis did have the will. Egypt doesn't, unfortunately. There's a corruption there, and they're part of the Western system, and they rely on it, and with all their corrupt leadership there. Unfortunately, it takes a small country poor country like Yemen is the only one who stood up with all of the riches and all of the established militaries of all the other nations in the area. Mm-hmm. The Houthis are the only ones who stepped up.
Yeah.
So I commend those brothers there.
Yeah.
But no, you're not being cynical because they've never proved it. It's actually reality and practical, what you just said.
And Hajj, no one threw bigger iftars than Barack Obama and President Obama for 8 years. What did he do on exit when he was lame duck, October of 2016? He writes into law, executive order, that Israel is to receive $30 billion in military aid over the next 10 years, no matter who the president is.
Right.
Right? And no more ideologue than Barack Obama. And we're surely not going to bring Joe Biden, and even in near his same room, and look what he did.
Okay, let me say this. I'm very encouraged. I'm very encouraged by what I am seeing in terms of activism. What I have been seeing is unprecedented in our modern time. I mean, I haven't seen this kind of activism, and in fact, it even eclipses that activism of the 60s that we witnessed. I mean, what we're seeing today with respect to the response to the what's happening in occupied Palestine, this is unprecedented, and it's something to be in my opinion, to be encouraged by, and it is having an impact. It is. There are politicians in both parties that are feeling the pressure of these consistent public demonstrations that have been taking place in different parts of the US and the world. There have been politicians who have been forced to try to defend their weak on their relationship to Zionist Israel and its lobby here in the United States. And that is only because they have been feeling pressure. Right now, there is a very real possibility. I mean, not only has Biden been falling in the polls, and at the end of the day, I mean, this election to office and re-election to office, this is the primary concern of these, self-serving politicians. They want to be elected. The wannabes want to be elected. Those already elected, they want to be re-elected. And there is a tremendous amount of concern on the part of Biden and his, frontline functionaries within the administration that his re-election is at risk. And it's at risk because of the awareness and because of the activism connected to the awareness. So, we know how these people are. And in fact, that's the reason why our topic for today is as it is. And given the fact that we're winding down now, I'd like for us to hone in on that. Should Muslims who are, accustomed to being invited to attend the iftars at the White House, the iftars that take place at the governor's mansion and the mayor's mansion in different cities, should they attend these iftars in this year where a genocide is taking place, when the person who will be the primary host, the president or the governor or the mayor, has the wrong position on this issue of support to apartheid Israel and what Israel is doing? Should we be attending these iftars this year?
Absolutely not. How could you have break bread and break your fast with the same person who is supplying the bombs that are killing your fellow Muslims? It doesn't make sense. We should cut. I mean, if we're going to boycott him politically and socially, we should boycott him religiously also.
Yeah, great point.
Great point.
Yeah, and I can tell you, brother Mohammed Ibn Bashir, who is in D.C. near the White House, if they ever see this video, he ain't getting no invite anyway.
Bro, I lost my invite with Obama. I got invited. I lost my invite then. So
You ain't coming. Listen, Hajj. Two things on that. One is absolutely we should be as loud as possible. Articles written, putting together one for the MuslimStreet.com currently. I would encourage others to do so. That if any Muslim, if they decide to throw that iftar, which I haven't heard anything about it yet, I haven't got any dates coming out of the White House on that big one. The any Muslim who we see there, they should be ostracized in the national community. Second of all, last week I got invited to participate in the Tampa Bay Muslim iftar put together where they invite all the politicians and everything. The difference is here, we're controlling the narrative. And I suggested as the lead speaker, Dr. Norman Finkelstein, who is as anti-Zionist of a Jew that they will ever get. So I want to sick him on them, his own people. And I got to tell you something, it's going to be live and in person. I can't wait. So the mayor will be there, the congresswoman will be there. It's going to be nice. But so in the case like that, where we're controlling the platform and inviting them and setting the specifications for what's going to go down with the speeches, yes. But that White House thing, which is going to be highly political this year. They lost Minnesota because of the Somali Muslims. They lost Michigan because of the Arab Muslims and the Arab vote there. They're in trouble. Those are two swing states. If they lose them, Biden loses the White House, period. 20% non-committed on that just last week in Minnesota, 13% in Michigan. This is huge. They cannot win the election with those numbers, right? So it's going to be highly political and see how they roll this out, but they're going to roll it out. And our reaction to it has to be just like on point with it.
Yeah, I agree. We have to hold anybody who does, if they do have an iftar or an Eid celebration or whatever, that anybody from our community, and there will be, if they do it, people from the Muslim community attend. There always are. Yeah. We have to hold them accountable afterwards. And I think what you see in Hajj in the protests, the young people are setting a new tone that we haven't seen before. And they are a lot more vocal to the leadership. And I think that will have an effect. And there will be more people declining. But we've put it out from all of our networks to decline it. If they are doing invite, it's going to be very low key. They might only send them to people they know will come. But whoever does are doing it for selfish and personal reasons usually. And we must hold those accountable to the community.
Or they might use the playbook that Trump used. He shut down the iftars at the White House, and he went to the rich Arab states to their consulate and had a dinner. So you never know how they will talk, but it'd be interesting to try to get out in front of it.
Well, I tell you this here, bro. If you have Norman Finkelstein at your joint,
yes,
none of these politicians are coming. They would not take the risk of being taken in a photograph with Norman Finkelstein there and be accused by the ADL or anybody, ADOS or any of those, hanging out with that guy in the middle of the night. I'm telling you, they will politely decline your invitation.
We already had a commitment from the local politicians and all that. So to be continued, and I will definitely inform you on how this plays out.
As it relates to iftar in and of itself, one of I've never supported that. So this iftar now to take the invitation, I've never supported that as being something that Muslims should participate in because of the religious significance of it. We have 360 days, 330 days a year to explain Islam to the country, to the nation, to the government, anytime we want to. The iftar, however, is a gathering for the Muslims to break their fast. The people who have submitted that day to the will of Allah, who want to gather together and enjoy each other's company, eat, pray, etc. It's not to be a political stunt. The first time that political stunt was performed, it was Thomas Jefferson.
Yes.
Who held the first iftar. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton revived it. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton revived it right on the heels of their criminal justice reform bill.
Yes.
That was incarcerating Black people out of the culture. Barack Obama continued it with what? Bombing Libya, destroying half of Africa,
Yeah.
While we sat and ate and broke fast. What do? We separate that it was Allah's blessing upon us with this iftar to be able to come together to eat, to break the fast. That important part of breaking the fast, like it's insignificant because we are allowing other people in on it. Well, the politics aside, I've never supported it. I definitely would not support it now, but I would definitely not support it for the exact same reason. This is something that Allah gave to the believers, right? If they want to come by and participate, let them come to the masjid. But they have to participate. Like the brother said in Miami, the agenda is controlled by the Muslims. The iftar is controlled by the Muslims. All right.
Yeah.
And the Muslims should control it because it is a religious, it's part of the deen. It's part of our faith. It's part of what we do as Muslims. And so for us to turn that over to the White House as an invitation, like they're doing something for us, all it really does is it establishes that it's those people who want to feel like we participating in America. Let's be for real. Black people know that real well. Black people love to be appeasement Negroes. We want to be like accepted in the halls of power. As Muslims, we don't really need that. We know where the halls of power are. They're at the masjid with the iftar. That's where the halls of power are. If we can just get back to that kind of concept, maybe we can attract them to the masjid. All right, because that would demonstrate the unity that it's supposed to demonstrate. These historic imams, these intellectual imams, these intellectual scholars, etc., come to my masjid and sit down with the people, and you'll see the 100 people that we have may turn to 1,000 people that we have at that masjid. And that might be a better barakah for America, for the community, for the nation, for the world, to be able to see that the Muslims are rejecting these so-called halls of power, and they are treating the blind man who really wants the Islam above the intellectuals who really don't want the Islam. Do we have an example of that somewhere in the Sunnah and in the Quran? Maybe that's what we need to be thinking about.
Okay, I think it's important here to clarify something though. Once that the iftar in the White House was started, it was continued by every administration. It wasn't leapfrogged by the Obama administration. It was something that once it started, every administration continued it.
Right, but I was just citing them as to the historical. Yeah, but I was just citing them as to the historical significance as to what they were doing politically versus, because I could go through George Bush and Ronald Reagan and all that to what they were doing politically to the Muslim world, but those two have particular aspects that stand out. The Muslims were incarcerated 5 times more than the average black person under Clinton. All right, and the Muslims were destroyed in Libya and in Africa under Obama. So I just use those as just 2 examples. I mean, we can go to Bush. He had an iftar while his daddy was talking about the Iraqis throwing babies out of incubators, which was a cold-blooded lie and started the Persian Gulf War. And so we could go on and on and on as to what they do in public versus what they are doing around the world toward the Muslims.
Okay,
I like what Hajj Malik is doing in Tampa, controlling the narrative. We traditionally also have an iftar event in Chicago where we invite the mayor and all 50 aldermen. This year, we're not inviting all 50 aldermen. We're only inviting the mayor and the 23 who voted for the ceasefire resolution. The other 27, no invite.
You're not eating our food.
That's right.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good move. On a final note, subhanallah, we are we are at the end of the broadcast. 1 minute each. A final thought from each one of you, just in 1 minute. Whatever you would like to convey to the viewing and listening audience on this issue of whether or not we should be interacting with the politicians, especially those who have taken the wrong position on this crisis during the month of Ramadan. And if we should, how should we? In 1 minute, let's start with you, brother Abid in Chicago.
Yes, I think what you said, where you've never seen this much mobilization by our community. We need to continue that. We need to keep the pressure. We do not need to show weakness. Going to this iftar or associating or supporting or dialoguing with these politicians who support the genocide that's happening to the Palestinian people and other peoples across the world.
Mm-hmm.
We have to start laying down the red line and the line in the sand. We cannot. We have to continue. And they are shaking. What Brother Muhammad said, they are shaking behind the scenes, and they're trying to play these games and trying to figure out how they could offset the loss of our votes. And they're going to try all these other games, trotting out Kamala Harris last week, that's for ceasefire. You know, that's just another play. And like Brother Malik said, you know, we have to play chess. We have to keep up the pressure. We have to know. We have to have a good strategy. And yes, we cannot support or associate with these politicians anymore.
Okay, brother. Alhamdulillah. Thank you. Brother Malik, your 1 minute. Final thought.
Yeah, just in the context of we are the brothers on this platform, we are the intellectual revolutionaries of how are we going to cast this struggle? How are we going to raise it? And I would say that we had the Afro-Arab bloc that existed as we broke up colonialism in the late 50s and 1960s, the Casablanca bloc, which consisted of Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Libya, Egypt, Morocco under Mohammed V, and Algeria as a start, Muhammad Gamal Abdel Nasser. We have to raise this bar. We're talking about international liberation. And the last thing I would say in closing that would be the quote from Durrell bin Wahad, who was part of the Panther 21, a political prisoner for 18 years. There's not much new in the playbook of European settler states, of which the United States is a prime example. Nothing new except the address. History doesn't repeat itself, it only rhymes. Maybe in a different location, but it rhymes nevertheless.
Okay, Brother Muhammad, your final thought, Aki.
Alhamdulillah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That was heavy. Always loved listening to Daruba. But my thought is this. I agree 100% with anybody who is exercising the protest, anybody who's exercising the organizing. But once I lectured to a group of people who were fired up over the shooting of a young black kid in New Brunswick, New Jersey. In the back of that room was a group of people called Occupy Wall Street. They were majority Europeans, what we commonly refer to as white. And I asked them at the end of it, since black people are consistently gunned down in the street, whether or not once they got their jobs back, once they got their relief from the Occupy, once their jobs were saved by Obama, would they still be in the struggle for those people who were getting killed and murdered on the streets? And I say the same thing here. The strength of this particular movement is the emotion and the novelty, the newness of it right now. What's going on in Palestine right now, we can all see. We could all see with George Floyd had a knee on his neck. We could see the novelty of it. The question is, when it begins to die, if you don't understand the necessity for moving it forward, to garnering it, to bringing it together and to move it forward. If you want to be political, then you are to be moving this particular, this protest, etc., toward political organizing and political solutions. If you want to see international change, then you ought to be moving it toward other areas in the world that are having international problems. Make your movement, make our movement, make the discussion of what it is to be Muslim and to challenge, to speak truth to power, make it an international discussion and make it an international movement so that nobody can ever do it again without it echoing in France and in Morocco and in Sweden and in Norway and in Ukraine and in Chicago and in Detroit, so that it echoes when we speak with one voice. When we stomp loud. And inshallah, if we can do that, then alhamdulillah, continue to protest, continue to keep the pressure on, but understand the nature of it is that the shaitan, the evil, is not going away. And the way you beat it is to be as consistent in your pressure and your love as they are in their evil and their hate.
Alhamdulillah. I want to thank all three of you brothers for joining us today. And inshallah, this conversation will, without any doubt, continue. The work around this catastrophe that the world is witnessing, no doubt this work will continue. Again, I want to salute the brothers and sisters, both in terms of Islam and our brothers and sisters in humanity who are responding to this on a consistent basis. I mean, it's just been amazing for me to see. It's something that has given me a bit more optimism in the generation that is coming up now, and the struggle. Inshallah ta'ala, it will continue, and we will see a free Palestine, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah.
We will close out as we normally do with Surah Al-Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi kusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Which means, in the translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time, through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.